One might say that if the most powerful wolf in all the realm had simply learned to watch his own back, a tavern girl would never have needed to save his life. But then again, if that same girl had only stayed long enough to give her name, he would never have spent the 7 days that followed tearing his own kingdom apart to find her. So when you weigh it all up honestly, the whole ridiculous affair was his fault. Every hour of it. Every sleepless, searching, half-mad hour. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. The brindle hound sat where 2 poor roads crossed on the wrong side of Dunkero, which was the only reason it had any custom at all. Nobody came for the ale, which was thin, or the beds, which were thinner. They came because it was the last warm room before the moors, and because Hedda, who owned the place, had never once turned out a traveler who could pay, and had fed a good many who could not. It was the kind of house where a person could pass through and leave no mark, and that, more than the warmth or the stew, was why Sorel had stayed as long as she had. Sorel worked the floor the way she did everything, quietly and completely. She carried 4 cups in 2 hands without spilling a drop. She knew which table had drunk enough to turn mean and which had drunk enough to turn generous, and she read both from across the room before either table knew it about itself. Most of all, she kept her head down, because a girl who kept her head down was a girl nobody looked at twice, and being looked at twice was the one thing Sorel could not afford. She had a talent for being furniture. She had worked at it for years, the way other people worked at being seen. She noticed the man in the corner because he did not fit. He wore a plain traveler's cloak, the hood up against a warmth that did not call for it, and he nursed 1 cup of dark cider he had not touched. His boots were wrong. Good leather, barely worn, the boots of a man who did not walk the moor roads but rode them, and had someone else see to the mud. He sat with his back to the wall and his eyes on the door, and when he thanked her for the cider, his voice was low and easy and carried the smooth shape of a man used to being obeyed and used to hiding that he was used to it. None of that was her business. She had learned long ago to let strange men keep their secrets, the same way she kept her own. What was her business began when the door opened and let in 3 more who did not fit, and let in the cold with them. They came without stamping the mud off their boots, which no honest traveler ever forgot to do. They did not look at the fire or the food or the pretty girl pouring at the bar. They looked at the corner, all 3 at once, in the flat, unhurried way of men who already knew exactly where a thing was and only needed to reach it. And beneath the smell of wet wool and road dust, Sorel caught the thin, bright note of oiled steel kept close under a coat. Her own wolf came awake beneath her skin, quiet and certain, and told her what her eyes had already worked out. This was a killing, and it was about to happen in Hedda's front room. She did not think. Thinking was slower than she was. She set down her tray, lifted the heavy iron kettle from its hook by the hearth, and when the first man's hand went inside his coat, she swung it into the back of his knee and put him on the floorboards hard enough to rattle the cups on every table. The room came apart into noise. The second man turned on her, blade already out, and Sorel did the thing her old teacher had beaten into her across 100 cold mornings she tried never to think about. She stepped inside the swing instead of away from it, caught his wrist, turned it past where a wrist was meant to go, and let the knife drop into her waiting hand. Then she pivoted, hauled the hooded stranger up out of his chair by the collar, and shoved him toward the passage behind the bar. The third man was fast. He came around the tables with a short sword low and level, and for half a breath Sorel saw how this ended, saw the whole cold arithmetic of it. So she changed the arithmetic. She kicked a stool into his shins, and when he stumbled, she was already there. And she made sure he stayed down without making sure he stayed dead, because dead men could not answer questions, and she had a feeling, even then, that there would be questions. It was over in the time it took Hedda to scream once and stop. 3 men down and groaning, and the stranger standing in the passage staring at her, and Sorel breathing hard with a stolen knife in her fist, and 40 pairs of eyes fixed on the last thing in the world she wanted, which was to be seen. The stranger pushed back his hood. Whatever he had been hiding under it, the weight of him rolled out across the room like heat off a forge, and every wolf in the brindle hound, Sorrel included, felt the floor of their own instincts tip toward him. An alpha. Not merely an alpha. The alpha, the true and total kind that the body knelt to before the mind had finished deciding anything. He looked at her as though she were the only lit thing in a dark room. "You," he said, and there was wonder in it. "What is your name?" And Sorrel, who had just understood exactly whose life she had saved and exactly how much that changed everything, did the only sensible thing a woman in her position could do. She dropped the knife, turned, and walked out the back door into the dark, and she did not tell him a single thing. Corvin, king of the northern reach, and alpha of every wolf who ran beneath its moons, had been told he would die young by a great many people who wished it, and he had made a lifelong habit of disappointing them. He had survived 3 winters of border war before he was 20. He had survived his own coronation, which was a thing not every king could say. He had survived, by his own rough count, more attempts on his life than he cared to number, each cleaner and closer than the last. He had never once been saved by a stranger who then refused to be thanked. He stood in the ruined front room of a Moor inn while his guards, who had been waiting 1 street over like fools because he had ordered them to, finally came pouring through the door. He let them take the 3 groaning men. He barely saw them. He was looking at the back door, which was still swinging on its hinge, and at the dark beyond it that had swallowed her whole. "Find her," he said. His captain, a broad and careful woman named Eve, followed his gaze. "Find whom, Your Majesty?" "The girl. The one who put 3 armed men on the floor with a kettle and a borrowed knife, while my own guard stood in an alley picking their teeth." He heard how it sounded even as he said it, and did not care. "She went out the back. She cannot be far." They were not fast enough, and she was better than fast. By the time the guards had spread into the alleys behind the Brindlehound, there was nothing to find, but rain starting to fall, and 100 crossing scents already going cold. Corvin stood in the middle of it with his hood down, and the water running off his hair, and felt something he had not felt in years, which was the particular helplessness of wanting a thing he could not simply command into his hand. Kings were not, as a rule, made to be well acquainted with that feeling. He found he liked it even less than he had expected. He had spent his whole reign learning to want nothing he could not have delivered to him, because a king who wanted is a king who can be steered, and there was always someone at court hoping to take the reins. And now, here he stood, wanting one thing in the whole world that no order of his could reach, and the wanting had a name attached to it that he did not even know. He went back inside. The woman who owned the inn stood behind her own bar with her arms folded and her chin up, plainly terrified and plainly determined not to show it, which he respected more than most of the courage he was shown at court. "Your girl," he said. "The one who served the corner. What is her name?" Hedda's eyes did something complicated. "We hire a good deal of casual help, Your Majesty. Moor girls, road girls. They come for a season and they go. I could not tell you the half of their names." It was a lie. He knew it was a lie the way he knew north from south, because he had spent his whole life reading the faces of people who were lying to protect someone they loved, and this was that face exactly. But he also understood that a woman who would lie to a king to shield a serving girl was a woman who would go to the block before she gave that girl up, and threatening her would only close the last door he had. So he tried the other thing, the thing kings were bad at. "She saved my life," he said quietly. "I do not wish to punish her. I do not wish to frighten her. I wish only to find her, and to know her name, and to thank her properly. That is the whole of it. On my honor, as your king." Hedda looked at him for a long moment, weighing him the way a woman weighs a coin she suspects is trimmed. "If I ever see such a girl," she said at last, "I will tell her a king was grateful. That is the most I can promise you." It would have to be enough. It was not remotely enough. Corvin walked out into the rain, and Eve fell into step beside him with her jaw set. Your Majesty, 3 men, coordinated, armed, waiting for you at an inn you told no one you meant to visit. She let that sit. Someone knew where you would be. Someone in the household knew. He had already reached the same cold place and hated it. Someone close had sold him. The rescue and the traitor were 2 ends of the same thread, and the only person who had seen the killers clearly, who had smelled the steel before it was drawn, who had moved before anyone else in that room understood there was anything to move against, was a girl with no name who had vanished into the moor. He needed her found for the sake of his own life. That was the reasonable truth, the one he could say aloud to his captain, the one that would survive being repeated to a war council. The other truth, the one he did not say, was that he could still see her face, furious and unafraid, telling him nothing at all, and that some old shut door in his chest had come open when she looked at him, and he did not think it would close again until he stood in front of her. 7 days, he said. The treaty envoy arrives in 7 days, and I will not meet them with a knife loose in my own house. Before then, I will know who tried to kill me. He stopped and turned his face up into the rain. And I will find the woman who would not let them, whatever it costs, and however far she has run, I will find her. The first day gave him nothing, and it very nearly broke him, and there were 6 more of them waiting in a line behind it. Corvin was a methodical man beneath all the ease he wore for the court, and he ran the search the way he would have run a campaign. He had the 3 captured men questioned, separately and without cruelty, which was slower but truer, since a man in pain will say anything, and a man merely cornered will sometimes say something real. They gave up little. They had been paid in clean coin by a go-between they had met in the dark. They did not know the name of the hand above him. They had been told only where the king would be and when, which meant everything and pointed nowhere, the where and the when. Corvin turned that over through the whole of the first night. He had decided on the brindle hound himself, on a whim, an hour before he rode. He had told exactly 4 people. He made himself write down the 4 names, and then he made himself stop looking at the list, because 2 of the 4 were men he would have trusted with his own life, and one of them was the man who had all but raised him after his father died. And a king who begins suspecting the men who raised him has already lost something he cannot buy back. He set the list in a locked drawer and went looking for the girl instead. That, at least, felt clean. It did not go well. The word had spread the way word always did, faster than truth and twice as loud. By the morning of the first day, half of Duncaro had heard some version of it. The king had been set upon at a moor inn. A woman had saved him. He was searching for her, and there might be a purse in it, or a place at court, or a king's own gratitude, which was a currency that spent well in a poor city. And so, by the afternoon of the first day, the women began to arrive. They came to the outer gate in a steady, hopeful, entirely useless stream. A miller's daughter who had once thrown a punch at a fair and thought that near enough. A hedge witch who swore the fates had shown her the king's face in a bowl of milk. A tall girl with a borrowed sword and no idea which end to hold. Eve turned them away with a patience Corvin knew cost her, and each time the gate opened his head came up, and each time it was not her, and something in him ground a little thinner. By the second day the false leads had grown teeth. A tavern keeper 3 streets over swore the woman worked his floor, and Corvin went himself, hood up, heart doing something undignified, and found a kind, bewildered stranger who had never held a knife in anger in her life. On the 3rd day, a guardsman brought word of a moor girl seen boarding a cart for the coast, and they chased the cart down half a day's road and found a wool merchant's daughter who wept with fright until they let her go. Each miss was a small death. Each morning the 7 days stood shorter and the envoy rode nearer, and the knife in his household stayed exactly where it was, patient and unfound. He had not expected it to feel like this. He had gone into it thinking of the traitor, of the danger, of the sensible reasons a king needed such a woman found. But somewhere in the long gray hours of the fourth day, he stopped pretending. He was not only hunting a witness, he was hunting the way she had looked at him with no fear and no want and no calculation, only a clear, cold competence and then a flat refusal. And he had never in his life been refused by someone who owed him nothing and wanted nothing, and he found he could not let it lie. On the moor, Sorrel was not letting it lie either, in her own way, which was to keep her head down and her mouth shut, and to leave. She packed a small bag in the gray before dawn. She had done it before, in other towns, under other names, and she was good at going. Better at it than she was at almost anything that did not involve her hands. Hedda found her at the door with the bag on her shoulder and did not try to stop her. Only pressed bread and hard cheese into her hands and held her face for a moment and said, "Be careful," and did not say the other thing, which was that a king does not stop looking simply because a girl stops being found. Sorrel went out onto the moor road at first light, and she had walked perhaps 2 miles into the mist when she heard it. Riders, a full patrol at least, coming up the road behind her at a steady hunting pace, and she stepped off into the gorse and went still, and watched them pass, mailed and grim and moving with purpose. They were not the king's colors. She knew the king's colors. These men wore no colors at all, and they were riding hard toward the brindle hound, toward Hedda, toward the one door in the world that knew her name. Sorrel stood in the wet gorse with the cold going down her spine and understood 2 things at once. The men who had come to kill the king had not finished. And whoever had sent them had worked out, faster than the king had, exactly where to start looking for her. Sorrel had spent her whole life learning how to leave. She was very good at it. She was less practiced at turning around, and yet she found her feet already carrying her back down the moor road into the mist, toward the very door she had spent the morning trying to put behind her forever. The math was simple and terrible. If she kept walking, she saved herself and lost Hedda, because those riders were going to the brindlehound to ask a question, and the question was her name, and Hedda would die with her mouth shut before she gave it. Sorrel had met exactly one person in the world who would do that for her. She was not going to let the world take that person away to punish her for a kindness. She came over the low rise above the inn as the riders reached the yard. There were 6 of them, dismounting, unhurried, and their leader already had one gloved hand on the door. Through the front window she could see Hedda inside, small and straight behind her own bar, and Ansel the cook frozen with a ladle in his hand, like a boy who had wandered into a war. Sorrel did not have a plan. She had a woodpile and the element of surprise, and a lifetime of doing the frightening thing before her body could vote against it. She took a splitting axe from the block by the stable, came in low and fast along the wall where the window could not show her, and put the flat of it into the base of the leader's skull before he had finished turning the handle. After that, it was only work. It was hard work, and it was close, and twice she felt steel part the cloth at her ribs without quite reaching the meat beneath. But she had the doorway, which meant they could only come at her 2 at a time, and 2 at a time was an arithmetic she could solve. When it was done, she stood in the trampled yard with her chest heaving and her hands shaking, and 4 men groaning in the mud and 2 more gone hard into the mist, and Hedda came out and wrapped both arms around her and held on without a word. Then Sorrel understood the thing that had already decided itself. She could not leave now. Leaving had been the plan when leaving cost only her own comfort. Leaving now cost Hedda her life the moment Sorrel was over the horizon. So she stayed. She stayed through the 4th day and the 5th, sleeping in her boots with the axe by the door. And every dawn she told herself the riders would come back, and every dusk they did not. And the waiting wore her thinner than any fight ever had. The king came on the 7th day. She knew it was him before she saw him, the way the whole inn seemed to lean toward the door when it opened, the way her own wolf sat up under her ribs and paid attention. He had come himself, with only Eve and a small guard, and he had come without his crown or his colors, in the same plain cloak, as though he understood that the girl he was hunting would bolt at the first flash of gold. He stopped just inside the door and looked at her across the quiet room, and for a moment neither of them said anything at all. 7 days, he said finally. His voice was rough, as though he had not slept in most of them. 7 days I have turned the city over stone by stone, and you were here the whole while. You did not run. I ran, Sorrel said. Then I came back. There is a difference. Why? She tipped her head at Hedda, who stood white-knuckled behind the bar. Because they were going to hurt someone who mattered to me to get to me, and I do not let that happen. Something moved behind his pale eyes, something that was not the wonder from that first night, but was made of the same stuff, older and quieter. Then you already understand my whole difficulty better than my entire court, he said, because that is precisely the position I am in. Someone in my own house wants me dead, and they have now learned that the one person who can smell them coming is a woman with no name who saves innkeepers with a splitting axe. I am not for hire, Sorrel said. I am not offering to hire you. I am telling you that you are already in this, whether either of us wished it. Those men came back for her once. They will come again, and next time it will not be 6. And you cannot hold that door forever. He took one slow step closer. Come to Duncarrow. Both of you. Behind walls I can actually defend, with people I am about to find out whether I can trust. Help me find the hand above the knife, and I will keep her safer than any axe can. It was not a request she could refuse. That was the trap of it. And she saw the trap clearly, and she walked into it anyway with her eyes open, because the alternative was Hedda in the mud. She looked at the old woman, who gave a small, helpless nod, and then she looked back at the king. My name, she said, is mine to give. You do not get it by finding me. No, he agreed, and to her great annoyance he almost smiled. I expect I shall have to earn it. She gathered her small bag and Hedda's smaller one, and she walked out into the yard and swung up behind the guard. And when the gates of the royal city closed behind her that evening, tall and iron and final, Sorrel felt them close in her chest as well. She had spent 7 years staying no place long enough to be found. She had a rule, and the rule had kept her alive, and the rule was that the moment a place learned your true shape, you left it before the knowledge could be used against you. Every town had been a held breath. Every name had been a coat she could shrug off at the first sign of trouble. Now the most powerful man in the realm had found her and shut a wall around her, and did not even know her name. She sat behind the guard with Hedda dozing against her shoulder and the iron gate swinging closed on the only life she had ever managed to keep, and she told herself it was only for the old woman, only until the danger passed, only a season like all the other seasons. She had told herself a great many careful things over the years. This was the first one she could feel, even as she thought it, that she did not entirely believe. They gave her a room with a real window and a real bed, and Sorrel did not sleep in it. She sat in the chair by the door with her back to the wall until the sky went gray, because a soft bed in a strange house was how careless people died, and she had not survived this long by being careless. The king sent for her in the morning, and she went expecting to be questioned like a prisoner. Instead, he had laid out a plain breakfast in a small room with no throne in it, and he was already eating, sleeves pushed back, hair still damp, looking less like a monarch than like a tired man who had been awake too long doing sums that would not come out. Sit, he said. Eat. You did not touch anything last night, and a hungry guard is a slow one. How do you know I did not eat? Because I had them leave a tray, and it came back untouched. And because you have the look of a woman who does not accept food she has not watched being made. He nudged a loaf toward her. I broke this one myself, in front of you just now. Watch me eat from it first if you like. She watched him eat from it first. Then she ate, and it was very good, and she was furious with how much she needed it. "I will not insult you by pretending this is a courtesy," he said, when she had finished. "I need your eyes. Whoever is trying to kill me is close, close enough to know where I sleep and where I ride, and I can no longer tell which of the faces at my table is lying to me." You looked at 3 men in a crowded room and knew them for killers before a single blade was drawn. That is a thing I need, and do not have. He set down his cup. "So I am giving you the run of this house. Every room, every ledger, every corridor. You answer to no one in it but me. If anyone asks by what right a Moor girl walks where she pleases, you may tell them it is the king's own." Sorrel stared at him. "You cannot simply hand a stranger the keys to your kingdom." "I can, in point of fact. It is nearly the only thing being king is good for." His mouth curved. "And you are not a stranger. You are the only person under this roof I am entirely certain did not try to kill me, on the straightforward grounds that you have twice done the exact opposite." It was such a plain, unornamented trust that it left her without a footing. She had been braced for suspicion, for a cage, for the cold, weighing look men gave a woman who was useful to them. She had not been braced for a king who simply believed her because the evidence said he should, and she did not know what to do with the warmth that put in her chest, so she distrusted it, which was safer. He walked her through the house himself, and it was in the long gallery, beneath the cold portraits of dead kings, that Sorrel came face to face with the master of coin, and the floor of her whole life tilted underneath her. "Ah," the king said warmly, "Osric. Good. I want you to meet the woman who has twice saved my worthless life." Osric was old now. Older than the last time she had seen him, which had been across the length of a burning training yard 7 years and a lifetime ago. But it was him. The same neat gray beard, the same soft, careful voice, the same kind eyes that had once told a frightened orphan girl that he would make her into something the world could not throw away. He looked at Sorrel, and for the space of a single heartbeat something flickered far back in those kind eyes, something that saw her and knew her and was not glad. Then it was gone, folded away so smoothly she almost believed she had imagined it, and he bowed to her as though to a stranger. "Any friend to His Majesty's safety is a friend to the treasury," Osric said gently. "You have my thanks, young woman. What did you say your name was?" "She did not," said the king, before Sorrel could answer, and there was something almost pleased in the way he said it, as though her silence were a small private joke the two of them shared. "She is guarding it. I am attempting to be worthy of it. Do not spoil my progress, Osric." The old man laughed, warm and easy, and moved on down the gallery, and Sorrel stood very still and did not breathe until he had gone. Because she knew that man. She knew the shape of his kindness, and the thing that lived underneath it, and she knew, with the cold certainty of her own scarred hands, that the training which had let her put 3 killers on a tavern floor had come from him. And if Osric had taught her to fight like that, then Osric knew exactly what she was, and exactly what she could do, and exactly how dangerous it was that she was now standing inside the king's own guard. She said none of this. She had learned long ago that a secret told was a secret you no longer controlled, and she did not yet know what game was being played, only that she had somehow walked into the middle of it. That night the blade came for the king in his own study. Sorrel was there because she had refused to leave, because the thin, bright note of oiled steel had been nagging at the edge of her senses all evening. When the panel behind the map cabinet swung open and the figure came out of the dark with a thin knife held low, she was already moving. She took the blade on her forearm rather than let it find his back, and she put the attacker into the bookshelves hard enough to bring down half the shelf, and by the time the guards flooded in, it was over, the would-be killer senseless on the floor, and a thin red line opening along Sorrel's forearm. Corvin knelt beside her and pressed his own sleeve to her arm, and his face was pale. But Sorrel, watching him with the flat, clear attention that never entirely switched off, saw the thing that mattered. He was not surprised. Alarmed? Yes. Furious, certainly. Frightened for her, which did something complicated to her chest that she chose to ignore. But underneath all of it, when the panel had opened and the knife had come, the king of the Northern Reach had not been surprised, and a man is only unsurprised by a thing he has been expecting. You knew, she said quietly, so the guards would not hear. You knew there was a door behind that cabinet. You have been waiting for someone to use it. For half a breath, something true and unguarded showed in his face. Then the mask came down, smooth and kingly and closed, and he pressed harder on her arm and said, "Let us see to this before you bleed on anything else of mine." And Sorrel sat there with his hand pressed over the cut and thought, not for the first time, that she had no idea at all which man she had saved. A king playing the fool, or a fool she kept mistaking for a king. She was keeping score, and the list of things that did not add up was already longer than her arm. She meant to watch him for lies. She spent the next fortnight watching him for something else entirely, and hating herself for it. It crept up the way the cold crept up off the moor, so gradual you did not feel it turn until you were already shivering. She would corner him with a hard question about the door behind the cabinet, about the men who kept coming, about the 4 names he would not say aloud, and he would answer with a joke and a slantwise look, and slide the whole conversation 3 rooms sideways before she noticed he had never answered at all. He gave her nothing she could use, and a great deal she did not know where to put. Because the trouble was that the longer she watched him for danger, the more she simply watched him. She watched the way he listened to the kitchen boys as carefully as to his generals. She watched him sit up past the middle of the night over the accounts of a flooded northern village, working out how to feed people who would never know his name. She watched him laugh, a real one, surprised out of him when she said something dry, and she felt the answering pull at the corner of her own mouth and looked away, too late. He brought her cocoa on the cold walls at the changing of the watch, 2 cups, and when he handed hers over, his fingers brushed the backs of her knuckles, and her whole arm lit to the shoulder like struck flint. She nearly dropped the cup. She covered it by glaring out at the dark. "You are not looking at the stars," he murmured. "They are stars. I have seen them. They are rather outshone tonight." He was looking at her openly, taking his unhurried time about it, and Sorrel, who had stared down 6 armed men in a muddy yard without her pulse rising, could not hold his eyes for more than a breath before she had to turn away. He smiled into his cup like a man who had won something small, and said nothing, and let her stand there in the cold with her heart going like a hunted thing. That was the unbearable part. She could never tell how much of it was real, and how much was a king being charming to a useful woman, and she did not know which man she was falling for, and she lay awake in the soft bed she still did not trust with her body humming and sleep nowhere, and her traitor mind gone straight to him. His hands, the line of his throat when the cloak fell open. A great deal more than his hands. It came to a head late in the map room, both of them bent over the same list of supply routes, close enough that she could feel the warmth coming off him. "What do you want?" she said, and it came out raw, not the question she had meant to ask. "Truly. From me. Because you will not say what you are hunting, and you will not send me away, and I cannot keep standing this close to you and not knowing. Tell me it is a scheme. Tell me you need a blade you can trust and nothing more. Tell me anything that makes sense, because I was not built to want things I cannot have, and you are making me want." She stopped. Too late. "Want what?" he said, low, and there was no teasing left in it at all. "Do not." Her voice cracked. "You know what? You have known for days. You have been enjoying it." He came around the table slowly, the way a person approaches something that might bolt. "What if it is not a scheme?" he said. "What if I simply want you? Not your blade. You. The woman who came back down a moor road for an innkeeper. Who will not give me her name because she has decided I have not earned it." He was close now. Close enough that she had to tip her chin to hold his eyes. "Tell me to stop, and I will walk out that door and never trouble you with it again, or ask me to prove it." The room was very quiet. Her pulse was very loud. "Prove it," she heard herself say. He kissed her, and every careful thing in Sorrel's head went white and silent at once. His hand slid into her hair and his mouth was warm and certain, and there was no crowd for it, no game, no watching court, only the two of them, and the lamplight, and the sudden total fact of him. Her knees forgot their office. She fisted one hand in his collar and dragged him down and kissed him like she had been thinking about it for a fortnight, because she had. She had spent her whole life being wanted for her hands, for her watchfulness, for what she could do. She had never once stood in the path of a man's plain, helpless wanting aimed at nothing but her, and it undid her, folded her resistance clean in half. His hands found her waist and drew her in, and she felt how much he meant it in the unsteadiness of his breath, and shivered head to foot. This was not a scheme. This was not a strategy. This was a man wanting her for no reason but wanting, and God's help her. She wanted him back, and for one reckless breath, she stopped keeping score. It was in that breath, over the king's shoulder, through the gap where the door stood the width of a hand ajar, that Sorrel saw the eye. Someone was in the corridor. Someone had stopped in the dark beyond the door and was watching them, perfectly still, and as her gaze snapped to it, the eye drew back, and the soft, careful sound of a retreating step whispered away down the stone. And Sorrel knew two things with sudden cold certainty. They had been seen, and the person who had seen them had known better than to be seen back. The court gathered 3 nights later to welcome the treaty envoy, and Sorrel stood among them in borrowed gray silk, feeling like a blade laid out on a table of spoons. She had guarded 100 such rooms from the walls and the doors. She had never once stood inside one as a guest, and every instinct she owned hated it. The open floor, the noise, the 100 bodies between her and the exits. She kept her back to a pillar and her eyes moving and told herself she was only working, and did not quite believe it, because across the room the king kept finding her with his gaze, and something in her chest kept answering before her good sense could stop it. He came to her at last on a colonnade, where the music thinned and the night air came cool off the gardens. "You hate this," she said, watching him. "Hate is a strong word." "You are lying." He laughed, surprised out of himself, and then the laugh faded and what was left underneath it looked tired in a way the court never got to see. "I am, aren't I?" he said. "I have been doing this since I was 19 years old. The smiling, the being exactly what they need me to be, so they do not look too closely at what I am not. Some nights I cannot tell if that makes me clever or only hollow." He stopped, shook his head, put the easy smile back on like a man pulling a coat over a wound. "Ignore me. Too much wine, and not enough sleep. Corvin." He met her eyes, and for a heartbeat she watched him brace the way he always did when someone got too near the thing underneath. She reached up and touched his face. His breath caught. The false smile came apart in her hand. "You are not what they think you are," she said quietly. "You are so much more than the performance, and the man underneath it." She paused, and the truth came out of her before she could weigh it. "I like him. A great deal." Something cracked open behind his eyes. "You do not know my name," he murmured, half to himself wondering, "and I do not know yours, and I have never in my life been more known by anyone." Then he kissed her, and the world shifted. It was not the heat. She knew the heat by now, the wanting, the familiar pull. This was something else entirely, something that poured in through the place where they touched. Relief and fear and a fierce aching tenderness, and none of it was hers. She could feel him, his feeling, distinct and clear and utterly foreign inside her own chest, as though a wall she had never known she was standing against had suddenly gone to glass. She jerked back with a gasp. His pupils were blown wide. "Did you?" he began. Sorrel. I think that was the... It was just a kiss, she heard herself say. He went still. A kiss, he repeated. His face did something quiet and terrible. Right, of course. Probably nothing. But his voice had changed, gone careful and far away, the voice of a man folding a hurt somewhere she could not reach it, and she hated that she had done it, and could not for her life have done otherwise. Because a bond was a door that could not be shut once opened, and she had spent 7 years keeping every door in her life firmly closed. A servant appeared at the edge of the colonnade with a tray, 2 cups of wine dark as old blood in the moonlight. Your Majesty, he murmured and offered it. Corvin did not move. He was still looking at her with that wounded, careful stillness, and he reached for the nearest cup without truly seeing it, and Sorrel's wolf came off its haunches with a snarl. She did not think. Her hand shot out and struck the cup from his fingers, and it shattered on the stone. Do not. Her hand closed hard around his wrist. Do not touch it. She was already down in a crouch over the spreading dark of it, and the smell reached up and told her everything. Beneath the fruit and the oak, thin and bitter and unmistakable, the same bright wrongness she had smelled once before in oiled steel. There is something in this, she said. Something bitter and deadly, near enough to kill an alpha where he stands. This was meant for you. The color went out of his face. She could hear her own pulse, could smell the poison and the wine and, under it, his own scent gone sharp with alarm, and the thought arrived cold and total that if she had been looking away, if she had been an arm's length further, he would already be dying on this floor. You will tell no one, he said. She stared at him. His face had gone hard, not frightened, calculating. Not the guard, not the envoy, no one. His grip found her hand where it still held his wrist. There is a foreign king 1 room away who came here to sign a peace. If word escapes that a man was poisoned under my own roof on the night of his welcome, I will have a war before the wine is dry. Trust me, just this once. I know what I am doing. Do you? She said, because the fear was making her cruel, and she pulled her hand free and walked away from him before he could see her face come apart. She gave him a slow count of 30. Then she followed. She kept to the shadows the way she had been taught, the way a soft gray teacher had beaten into her a lifetime ago, and she watched the king slip his own party and go down through the sleeping wings of the palace, down 2 flights of cold stone to the counting house where the treasury kept its ledgers. The door of the Master of Coin. Osric's door. It clicked shut behind him. For a long moment Sorrel stood in the dark of the corridor and could not make her legs obey. Then she crossed to the door and opened it without a sound. The king stood behind Osric's own great desk. The drawers were open. There was a sheaf of papers in his hand, and his head came up, and for one breathless moment neither of them moved. Sorrel, he said, very calm, very careful. This is not what it looks like. Corvin never paused. In all the weeks she had watched him, he had always had the answer ready before you had finished the question. But now he stood behind the old man's desk with the stolen papers in his hand, and he paused. And the pause told her more than any answer could have. Say something true, she said, without a word of it aloud, only her whole face begging him. His jaw went tight. Her stomach dropped through the floor. An hour ago someone put poison in your cup, she said. You told me to say nothing. And then you came straight down here in the dark to go through the Master of Coin's private papers. So tell me, Your Majesty, tell me what is happening and do not smile at me while you do it. He set the papers down. I have been investigating Osric, he said. The words would not resolve into sense. They were only sounds. For the better part of a year. His voice had gone quiet, even gentle. The smooth, careful one he used on frightened councilmen, the one he had not used on her in weeks, and was using on her now. Embezzlement. The treasury bleeds, and the northern villages starve, and the coin goes somewhere it should not. into old houses that would like a weaker king, or none at all. The supply lines that fail, the orders that contradict, all of it deliberate, and all of it his. And the men who keep coming for my life have been carrying his gold. No, she said. He came around the desk, not fast. Careful. Sorrel. She stepped back and he stopped at once. You do not know him, she said, and heard her own voice climbing. Osric is not. He would never. You do not know what that man. I know he trained you. The room went very still. I knew it the moment I watched you take 3 men apart in a tavern with a kettle, he said quietly. I have seen exactly one other person move the way you move, a long time ago, when Osric still ran the yard for the old king. He had a girl once, a protégé. The best he ever made, they said. And then a fire took the training hall, and the girl was gone, and Osric never spoke her name again. His eyes did not leave her face. I have been looking for that girl for 7 years, Sorrel. Not the way I looked for you this last week. Longer. Because I thought, if she was still alive, she was either the finest sword in the realm or the sharpest knife Osric had ever hidden, aimed at me. The floor she had stood on her whole life simply went. You brought me here as bait, she whispered, to see which one I was. He did not deny it. That was the worst of it. He held her eyes and did not deny it. It was all a lie, she said. The kindness, the trust. The keys to his house handed to a Moor girl. The plain, unornamented believing that had undone her more thoroughly than any suspicion could have. Every hour of it. You needed to know if I was his, and so you let me think. You let me. Not all of it. He came a half-step closer and she retreated into the doorway and he stopped again. I will not pretend it did not begin as strategy. I would be lying, and you would smell it. But it stopped being strategy the first night you sat in my breakfast room and made me eat the bread before you would touch it. Because I saw then that you did not trust anyone, and a person who trusts no one cannot be a spy sent to earn trust. And it was finished, wholly and forever finished, the moment I understood you would not give me your name. His voice roughened. A creature Osric planted at my side would have handed me a name the first hour. A pretty false one, chosen to please me. You gave me nothing. You made me earn a thing you were never going to sell. That is when I knew. Not that you were useful. That you were the one clean thing in my entire poisoned house. It was a good answer. That was the unbearable part of it. It was a good answer, and she hated it, because underneath it, quiet and cold, an older wound had opened its eyes. See? It whispered to her. You let yourself believe it. You let yourself think a king might want you for no reason but wanting. Now look what the wanting was for. You are wrong about him, she said, and the tears came and she did not stop them. Osric pulled me out of a workhouse when I was a child. He fed me. He made me into someone the world could not throw away. He is the one thing in my whole life that was never a lie. Then read this, Corvin said, and held out the papers, his voice gone hoarse. His hand, his ledger, the coin that bought the steel that has come for my back again and again. Read whose gold paid the men who rode to your innkeeper's door. No. She would not look. Because if she looked, the whole architecture of her life came down, and she was not ready. And so she did the thing she was very good at. She left. Sorrel, he said behind her, and his voice cracked clean down the middle. Please, there is a poisoner loose in this house, and a foreign king asleep down the hall, and I. He caught himself, forced it into better shape. I need you. Please. And there it was, even now, with her whole heart in pieces on the counting house floor. I need you. Not I am sorry. Not I cannot lose you. I need you. The same word every man had ever used on her, the useful word, the word that had made her hands and never once asked after her heart. Good night, Your Majesty, she said, and walked out into the dark. He was waiting for her in the corridor. Of course he was. Osric stood a dozen paces down the cold stone as though he had grown there, hands folded, kind eyes soft with a grief that stopped her in her tracks. And every child she had ever been went running toward him before the woman she had become could catch them by the collar. "Sorrel," he said gently. "Oh, child, you are white as a shroud. What has he done to you?" And because it hurt too much to hold, she told him that it had all been a lie, that the king had never wanted her, only used her, only kept her close to see whose knife she was. Osric's face folded into sorrow. "I know," he murmured. "I hope to spare you this. I have been trying to reach you for weeks, but he keeps you so close." He sighed, an old man's sigh, heavy with the weight of terrible knowledge. "And it is worse than you know, my girl. Far worse. The poison in the cup tonight. It was not meant for him. He let that land. It was meant for the envoy. He means to murder the peace and blame the foreign king, and take the war he has wanted all along, and I have the proof of it, and he knows I have it, which is why he was in my rooms tonight." His voice dropped, kind and grave and certain. "He will come for me before dawn. There is only one way to stop him. We go to the envoy now, tonight, together, and we tell what we know. But it cannot come from me alone. I am only a treasurer. They will say I grasp for power." His hand came out toward her, warm, familiar, the hand that had lifted her out of the dirt. "It must come from you, the woman who twice saved his life. If you say you saw him mix the poison, no soul in that room will doubt a word." And Sorrel, who had loved this man her whole life, stood very still and felt the last piece drop into place, because she had caught the flaw the moment it left his mouth. She had struck that cup from Corvin's own fingers not 1 hour ago. She had smelled the poison herself. The wine had been carried to the king, on the colonnade, by a servant, into the king's own hand. It had never gone within 50 paces of the envoy. Osric was telling her the poison was aimed at a man it had never been near, which meant Osric knew a thing about that cup that only the person who prepared it could know. The man who had made her hands had just told her, gently, kindly, exactly whose gold had paid the poisoner. Every instinct she owned wanted to weep, or to run, or to put her borrowed knife through the only father she had ever known. She did none of it, because there was one man in this house who commanded every soldier in it, and it was this one, and one woman alone against him in a dark corridor was not an arithmetic she could solve. So she solved a different one. "Tell me what to do," she said, and let her face crumple and let the child he had made come up into her eyes where he could see it. "Tell me, and I will do it. I only ever wanted to make you proud." Something eased in Osric's face. Something that had been a little uncertain went sure. "That is my girl," he said softly. And it was the kindest and most monstrous thing she had ever heard, and she followed him down the corridor toward the envoy's wing with her heart beating slow and cold, and her whole life narrowed to the single thing she now had to do. The envoy had taken the East Council room, and Corvin was already there, gray with the weight of the night, and he looked up when she came in behind Osric, and for half a breath his whole ruined face lit like a lamp. Then he saw who she walked in beside, and the light went out. "Your Grace," Osric said to the envoy, bowing low. "It shames me to bring this to you, but your host has wronged your peace, and this woman can prove it. Sorrel." He turned to her, and every face in the room turned with him, and he held out his kind old hand. "Tell his Grace what you saw." She looked at Corvin across the room. "I am sorry," she told him without a word. "I should have believed you the first time." Then she turned to the envoy. "I saw nothing of the kind," she said, "because it never happened. The Master of Coin is lying to you." The room snapped tight as a drawn bowstring. Osric went rigid at her side. "He says the king poisoned your welcome cup. she went on, clear and level, the way you report a thing to a captain. But there was only one poisoned cup tonight, and it was carried to the king's own hand on the garden colonnade, and I struck it from his fingers myself an hour ago, and I smelled the poison in it, and it never came within a wing of your grace. The master of coin knows the poison was in the king's cup, because the master of coin put it there. Her chin came up. Send men to his counting house now, while he stands here and cannot reach it, and see whether you find the ledger of a loyal servant or the account book of a man who has been buying my king's death by the season. This is hysteria, Osric said, and his kind voice had gone thin. The girl is distraught. She has been used and cast off. She does not know what she— Then a search costs you nothing, said the envoy quietly, and nodded to his own guard. Osric's face changed. The grief went out of it. The kindness went out of it. What was left was the thing that had lived underneath all of it her whole life, cornered now and stripped bare. And it looked at her with a hatred so pure it was almost relief to finally see it plain. He came at her with a knife out of his sleeve, fast, the way he had taught her to be fast. But this was the one thing in all the world Sorel knew how to do. She turned into him instead of away, caught the knife arm at the wrist, felt the old familiar architecture of a strike she had drilled 10,000 times under his own cold eye, and used his own weight to fold him down onto the stone. Her knee found the small of his back. The knife spun away across the floor. She leaned close to his ear, close enough that only he could hear it. "You made these hands," she said. "Did you forget what you made them for?" Then the guards had him and hauled him up and dragged him out, and it was done. The room emptied. The envoy went to reassure his own frightened party. The guards took Osric down to a cell beneath the old fort, and then it was only the two of them, the king and the woman who had just saved his crown, standing in a wreck of overturned chairs. Corvin had not moved. He was looking at her as though he had never seen her before. "You saved my life," he said. "Again. Even after everything even now." "I came to stop a traitor," Sorel said flatly. "That is all it was." The light in his face flickered and went careful. "Sorel. The bond. It is real. You felt it on the colonnade. I know you did. It does not matter whether it is real." Her voice did not shake, which cost her everything. "I stopped him because it was the right thing and because he was a traitor. Not one moment of it was forgiveness. You used me, Corvin. You looked me in the eye for weeks, and you let me hand you my trust, and the whole time I was a hook with bait on it." His face fell. The hope drained out of it. "I love you," he said. "I do not care how it started. That does not change what it became." "It changes everything," she said. "You can say the word mate like it mends the thing you broke. You cannot mend it. A bond does not undo a lie. I am glad you are alive. You will be a good king." A beat. And this was the part that broke her. So she said it fast. "But I cannot trust you. And I do not know if I ever will again." She saw it land in his eyes, the understanding that he had cracked something that would not come whole again. He did not reach for her. He had learned, at least, not to reach. "Then I will not ask you to," he said quietly. "But I will spend as long as it takes proving I am worth the trusting. However long that is." She walked out. She was getting good at walking out of rooms this man was in. He was true to his word, which was the maddening thing about him. He made her captain of his own guard within the month. And when the whole court muttered that a nameless Moor girl had no business holding the post, he stood at the war table and said that she had held his life in her 2 hands twice while his sworn men slept, and that he would hear no more of it. And the muttering stopped. She was good at the work. She had always known she would be. The palace ran clean and tight under her. The rot Osric had worked into it cut out root and branch, and the city, which had never much noticed its boy king, began quietly to love him for the mending of it. And every day, in the small, honest hours, he tried to win her back. And every day, she would not let him. The flowers came first, a month in. She walked off a dawn watch to find the whole barracks yard full of them and her own people grinning like fools to see what she would do. She sent them to the infirmary and the temple, and said nothing, and did not smile until she was well out of their sight. He tried the council chamber next, catching her eye across the troop numbers with a look so hopeful and uncertain it hurt to see, and she looked back down at the numbers and read the same line 4 times without taking in a word of it. After, he would find a reason to linger by the door. "Captain," he would say softly, "might I have a moment?" And she always found a reason she could not, and walked out past him with her spine straight and her chest aching, and hated that the ache did not fade the way she kept ordering it to. He wrote to her, letters in his own hand, 2 and 3 a week, some short, some running for pages, some not even about her at all. A posting, a pension dispute, a question about the northern grain, as though her plain opinion were still worth something to him. She read every one. She answered none. One of them said only, "I keep writing the same word 100 different ways, and the word is sorry, and it is a small and stupid word for the size of what I did, and I have no larger one, so I will simply keep sending it." Another said, "You told me once I felt close enough to take you to my bed and not close enough to tell you the truth, and you were right, and I have thought about that every day since. Instead of earning your trust, I spent it, like a fool spends an inheritance, all at once and on nothing." She folded that one very small and did not throw it away, and was angry with herself for a week. And she kept the bond shut with everything she had, because a bond left open only deepened, and a bond that deepened would set, and a bond that set would let this man all the way into a heart that had been broken into too many times to risk it once more. Pike, one of her young guards, told her once that the whole barracks had a wager running on how long she would hold out, and she put him on latrine duty for a fortnight, and the wager, she noticed, was not withdrawn. Then, in the 6th month, a letter came that was different. "Sorrel, you have made yourself clear, and I have been a coward not to hear it. You do not owe me your forgiveness, and I have spent half a year behaving as though you did. That was one more thing taken from you without your leave, and I am ashamed of it. I am sorry. I will stop now. You have my word, and I know precisely what my word has been worth to you, which is why I mean to keep this one." She read it twice. This was the thing she had wanted from the first day, so she could not for her life have said why it sat in her chest like a stone, or why, when she passed him in the corridors after that, and he only nodded, polite and even and never cold, only done, she felt each nod like a door easing shut somewhere she could not reach. "This is what you wanted," she told herself. She told herself that on the dawn watch, and on the long walk back from the war table, and in the narrow bunk where she still did not quite let herself sleep. She told it to Brannock, the gray barracks cat who had adopted her office and had opinions about everything, and Brannock looked at her the way Hedda had looked at her once, kindly and without a scrap of belief. She told it to Pike, who had stopped teasing her about the king some weeks ago, which was somehow worse than the teasing. She told it to the folded letter she still had not thrown away. The warm, patient thread under her ribs, the one she had spent 6 months trying to starve, stayed exactly where it was, and did not fade, and would not let her be. He went missing on an ordinary gray evening, and it undid her more completely than any blade ever had. Pike came into her office the particular color of a man who has made a terrible mistake, with Ansel at his shoulder gone the same shade. The king was not in his chambers, not in the council room, not the stables, not anywhere. No horse gone, no coin drawn, his sword on its stand and his clothes still folded, the room neat and ordered and empty, as though he had simply stepped out of the world. Sorrel was on her feet before she had decided to be. Osric's people had been rooted out, but a conspiracy that deep left seeds, and every one of them had reason to want the king who broke it dead in a ditch. "Wake the trackers," she heard herself say, already pulling on her sword belt. His sent off his chambers and every gate, quietly. No bells. If the city learns the king is gone, we will have a panic by dawn. The trackers caught his scent at the small east postern and lost it there, the way a scent stops when a man is being careful, or when a man is being carried. Sorrel stood in the pre-dawn cold with the wind cutting through her uniform and understood there was one way left to find him, and that she had known it from the moment Pike said gone. She pressed a hand flat to her own chest, over the bond she had spent half a year trying to smother. "It is duty," she told herself. "He is the king. Finding him is the job." It was not all it was, and she was too frightened now to pretend. She opened the bond. It hit her like a door blown off its hinges in a storm. Sorrow first, deep and bottomless, the twin of the one she had been carrying in silence for months. Then something loose and swimming and drowsy underneath it. His thoughts coming unmoored and drifting, and her own heart seized, because she knew that particular fog. He was drunk, not drugged, not taken. The most powerful wolf in the realm was somewhere out in his own dark city, unguarded and sodden and swimming in it, and she was moving before she finished the thought. Out and down and following the pull of him like a rope, hauling her forward. It led her down through the lower city into the narrow streets where the dawn had not yet reached, and it stopped at a tavern with warm light in its windows, and Sorrel came through the door low and ready with her hand on her hilt, braced for a back room and a blade and a body. There was only the king. Slumped half across the bar at the far end, collar open, hair a complete disaster, one hand loose around a cup, talking with enormous earnestness to a deeply uncomfortable barman. She stopped where she stood. "The thing you must understand," Corvin was saying, with the grave precision of the very drunk, "is that she saved my life in a room exactly like this one. Walked in a stranger, put 3 killers on the floor, and walked out again, and would not even leave me her name." He raised the cup, found it empty, gazed at it with betrayal. 7 days I looked for her. 7. And when I found her, I only managed to make her hate me, which, in fairness, I earned. He set the cup down with great care. "Did I mention she never told me her name?" "You did," said the barman in the flattened voice of a man who had been hearing about it for some hours. "Several times." "I do not even know what to grieve her by," the king said, quieter now, and the drink could not hide the raw thing underneath it. "A whole woman, and I do not have the one word that is hers." Sorrel crossed the room and took the empty cup out of his hand. "That is enough," she said. The barman shot her a look of profound gratitude. Corvin blinked at the cup, then followed the hand up to the arm and the arm up to the face, and his whole ruined, miserable expression cracked wide open into something so delighted it hurt to look at. And through the bond she had left carelessly open, she felt it hit him all at once. Joy and disbelief, and a longing he was far too drunk to hide. "You," he breathed. "You are here. You opened it. I felt you open it." "You vanished," she said, low and furious, because fury was easier than the other thing. "No guard, no word. Half the palace thinks you are dead in a ditch." "I told myself I would stop bothering you," he said, swaying gently toward her. "So I came out to bother a stranger about you instead." It seemed a reasonable compromise. He squinted. "You are very angry." "I am very angry. I knew you would be." He pulled back to look at her, blearily solemn. "You were always so certain no man could truly want you, that the only thing you were good for was your hands. He taught you that. Osric. He spent years teaching a brilliant girl she was only a knife, and you believed him, and you believe him still. And it is the single greatest lie in your whole life, and I cannot bear that you carry it." He blinked. "I am very drunk. But that part is true even so." She stood very still, because it was perhaps a little bit true. "That does not change what you did," she said. "No," he agreed with a drunk man's terrible readiness. "I was a coward. I hid the truth from you because I was afraid to lose you, and I lost you anyway, which is what cowardice generally earns." He nodded, pleased with the logic. Then his face went soft and stupid and undefended. "You are being a coward now, though. You would sooner strangle a bond between our two actual souls than risk getting hurt a second time. So," he wobbled a finger at her, "that makes two of us?" "I am not a coward," Sorrel said. "Prove it," he said, and his eyes were sliding half shut, and the bravado fell all the way away, and what was left was small and raw, and entirely without a mask. "Marry me." The whole room stopped. "What did you say?" she said. "Marry me." He tried for dignity and landed near pleading. "I dare you. I am a wreck without you, and I will spend the rest of my life making up the one lie I told. I swear it, He ran out of words and dropped his head into his hand, and through the wide open bond, it all poured into her unguarded. No angle, no strategy. The man who hid everything, hiding nothing at all. "I will not ask again," he mumbled into his own palm. "I said I would stop. I will stop. I will leave you be." Sorrel looked at him, caught between wanting to throttle him and wanting to hold him up, because he was listing slowly toward the floor. "Ask me again when you are sober," she said. "When you can actually remember asking." His eyes cracked open. "And you will say yes," he breathed. She opened her mouth to answer, and the king of all the northern reach passed out cold against her shoulder, his head lolling into the crook of her neck, his breath warm and even and smelling powerfully of cheap tavern wine. And Sorrel stood there in the gray dawn light with the whole weight of him leaning trusting and helpless against her, and felt herself smile for the first time in 6 months. She pressed her lips to his forehead. His skin was warm, his hair was soft. "Ask me tomorrow," she whispered against it, "and find out." In the end, it took him 4 months. 4 months of asking, every single day, sober in every way a man could manage, and a few no sensible man should attempt. He asked across the war table until Pike threatened to hand in his resignation in writing. He asked on the cold east wall with the cocoa going to ice in his hands. He asked badly and beautifully, and once with so many flowers the barracks smelled like a funeral for a solid week. And every day she told him to ask again tomorrow, until one perfectly ordinary morning she looked at the man grinning hopefully at her over the breakfast he had made her watch him prepare, and she said yes. The whole city came out for it. The boy king nobody had once bothered to take seriously, and the nameless woman who had seen the man behind the smile before anyone else troubled to look. He cried during the vows. She had known he would. She did not quite, but it was a near thing, and the bond gave her away regardless, and he laughed at her through his own tears until she stopped caring who saw. "You are stuck with me now," he murmured when it was done. "No taking it back." "Why would I take it back?" she said. "I am the one who saved you first, if you recall. In a tavern very like the one where you proposed. You have simply been catching up ever since." And then, at the last, she leaned in and told him the one thing she had never told anyone, the single word he had torn a city apart looking for and never found, the name she had kept locked away for 7 years, because a name was the last thing that was truly hers to give. He heard it, and he wept all over again, and this time she wept with him.